Welcome back, everybody, to week 6. And now we're going to chapter 7. We're staying with the middle childhood. And now we're going to look at socio-emotional development in middle childhood. So let's dive in. So I'm going to ask you the question, how do children become socialized? What kinds of behaviors do most parents try to instill in their children? How does media contribute to socialization? Think about these questions as we cover all the material in this lesson, okay? So let's begin with family relationships. It's where we first learn all our skills. So let's take a look. Our learning objectives for this first part is, what are the primary dimensions of parenting? What determines how siblings get along? How do firstborn, laterborn, and only children differ? So think about, what order are you in, or are you an only child? Think about the relationships that you have and what your personality type is. And see if it agrees with the research when we get there. How do divorce and remarriage affect children? So if you've been through divorce, or you as a child have been through the divorce, or you've seen your children be through the divorce and you remarried, I want you to picture that. So when you get to that, did you have the similar experiences? Where do you fit in on that? And what factors lead children to be maltreated? So we're going to take a look at all of that. So we're going to look at the dimensions and styles of parenting. So if you're a parent, I want you to picture yourself, in your parenting role and see where you fit, or you can think about your parents, where they fit in this. But I want you to visualize somebody while we're looking at this so you can help understand and remember it. So this is a diagram or a figure here that is going to illustrate parenting styles. So what it have at the beginning here is parental control, and on the side you have parental involvement. And you're going to see those high and low, and then you're going to see authoritative, permissive, authoritarian, and uninvolved. So we're going to go over that and to understand how these different styles and how you have to have high or low parts of these styles affects children's development. So if you combine two dimensions of parental behavior, warmth and control, so that side is parental involvement, which would be warmth if you have high, and parental control, you're going to create 4 styles of parenting. So those are authoritative, permissive, authoritarian, and uninvolved. And you're going to show that within these there's varying degrees of warmth with responsiveness, and uninvolved and hostile. So you're more focused on their own needs. So with this, you're going to get psychological control. So parents' efforts to manipulate their children's emotional states, withdrawing love or making children feel guilty, and imposing limits on what children can and cannot do. So some areas are dictatorial, and they regulate every facet of a child's life. Some have little involvement, exert little to no control over their children. They let their children do whatever they want, whenever they want, and they worry very little about what the parents say. So those are all varying styles of parenting. And we're going to learn where it fits on this little diagram here. So just with me describing it, can you have some idea where some of those traits are going to fit? Let's take a look at the next slide, and we'll go in these with more detail. So the 4 prototypical parenting styles that you saw in that figure are authoritarian, authoritative, don't get them mixed up, permissive, and uninvolved. So the first one, the authoritarian parenting. It's parents that lay down the rules and expect them to be followed without discussion. So that's your parent that says, I said go to bed because I said so. I said do this because that's what I said. So there's no discussion. I don't care what you think. It's my way or the highway. That's authoritarian. Then you have authoritative parenting. And that's a parent that explains rules and encourages discussion. And it's a balance between parental control and being warm and responsive to their children. So they actually encourage discussion and talking about it, and they explain the rules. But they still, have the rules followed, but they definitely encourage discussion. While authoritarian is more respect and obedience, and it has lots of control and little warmth. Permissive parenting is kind of just like what it sounds. Parents generally accept their child's behavior and punish infrequently. So on that, if we think of that figure, they're warmth and caring, so they're very high on warmth and caring, but little control. They just let their child do what they want. An uninvolved parent, just what it sounds like. Parents do little else but provide for child's basic needs. So they make sure there's food on the table, they have shelter, but they're not there for emotional support. They don't have rules. They could care less if you're going or coming. Parents avoid spending time with their children or getting emotionally involved. They're neither warm nor have much control. So which style do you think would be the best? Well, research has shown that children do best with parents with an intermediate amount of parental control. Reasonable standards for behavior, meet these standards, and know what and who their children are doing and with whom. Children benefit from warm and responsive parents. So which group do you think displays that the best? So that would be your authoritative parenting. Parents explain the rules and encourage discussion. So they found that that produces children with the most success. So dimensions of and styles of parenting. Which style do children fare best with? So we answered that question on the last slide. So authoritative parenting is usually the best. It tends to result in higher grades, self-esteem, and friendliness. They tend to thrive with that parental style that combines control, warmth, and affection. And that's what authoritative parenting does. Authoritarian parenting produces children who generally lack self-esteem and are overly aggressive. So why do you think that? So if you're never allowed to have discussions, or you're always being told what to do, you never can really develop your true self, and you might become angry, resentful of your parents. Permissive parenting, children are often impulsive, so they have no self-regulation. They don't learn how to pull themselves back. They get like a lot of instant gratification. Not really good for the realistics of life, right? In uninvolved parents, children tend to be aggressive and do poorly in school just because they've not been taught how to really be an adult. And so when they get frustrated, they show that in aggression, and they haven't been taught or given skills or been in an environment to develop the skills that would lead them to success in school with attention, with language, with reading, writing, etc. So as you can guess, parenting styles differ by cultural values. Just like anything else, what is valued in that culture is going to be expressed in that parental style. So European Americans usually value an authoritative style, and parents in China usually lean towards an authoritarian style. So they're going to produce different values in different children. Socioeconomic status and income have an influence on parenting style. Parents of low economic status are usually more authoritarian. They just don't know better. They don't have the knowledge of why a lot, or maybe they're just under so much stress to just try to survive. They don't have the time or the effort to explain the why to their children. And they just need to maybe keep them safe. So they just need them to know you can't go out at night because there's, criminal activity that might endanger them. You just need to know that. So sometimes it's just a matter of keeping their children safe, and they need to have that authoritarian nature. And parents with higher education and high economic status tend to have an authoritarian style. You can imagine after taking this class, you've been educated on all this. You're going to maybe apply it more. If you've had more education, you're going to apply these things. So you're just more likely to have that type of style. So just remember the takeaways. Some of the takeaways of this is that, so if we're looking at different parenting styles by culture, that China has emotional restraint and obedience as valued. Socioeconomic differences from educational differences, you'll see development as more complex process, and you're exposed to other ideas. And also lower socioeconomic parents may have more stress and not enough energy to invest in authoritative parenting. Remember I told you, especially in neighborhoods with violence, crime, and drugs, They may have to have strict rules to protect them from the environment that they live in. So sometimes it's just a matter of life and death. So as we've learning, specific parental behaviors influence children. So how does that happen? Well, one way is with direct instruction. So if I directly instruct a child, I'm telling a child what to do, when, and why. So I'm teaching them how to be an adult, how to complete activities, why they're doing it, and when it's important. It benefits the children's social skills, and they're more than making demands. So if I just say, clean your room, maybe the child doesn't understand. But if I say, you're going to have your friends over on Friday night for your sleepover. We need to keep your room clean. You need to have it done by Thursday so your friends come over. Then your child might be more engaged to be like, okay, I understand why. I got direct instructions, specific instructions. I'm more likely to complete the task. Another thing, modeling, right? We learned a lot about modeling. Parents and children, learn so much of behavior from just watching how you act. So parental behavior is often imitated. So if you have a yelling parent, you might notice that your child, like when he's with his peers, might be yelling and screaming at them. So a parent that reasons and explains a lot, you might notice a child that reasons and explains a lot with their peers. So just remember that parental behavior is being modeled by the children, and maybe why that there's a lot of passing of parental styles. Like my parents were authoritarian. I'm authoritarian. My children are authoritarian because that's all we know. And feedback and reinforcement increases likelihood of the response that follows. A negative reinforcement trap. So remember, this is something we're going to go over, but it's unwittingly reinforcing a behavior that parent is trying to diminish. So let's hit some highlights. So just remember that genes can positively and negatively impact parenting style. So even, genes always play a role to some degree in how we behave, right? So they found with twin gene studies, so that's the way that they can discover this, that it makes it easier for some people to be warm and caring and others to be hostile and angry. And we learned that, right? We learned that there's a gene for that oxytocin that makes us more, calm. And we have genes that make us introvert, extrovert, and they're a combination of genes. So you may have more of one combination. So you might just have that preset in you. It's not saying that you can't change your behaviors, right? But some people are just more likely warm, and now, and some people are more likely just get angry easier. So knowing that can help you direct how you're going to do your behavior. Another thing that's really important is it's two parents, right? A father and a mother, and they don't just have relationships with their children, they have relationships with each other. So the quality of the marriage relationship and the children themselves affect, demonstration of these parental behaviors and these traits. So if you tend to be hostile and you have a poor marriage relationship, those hostilities are going to be more shown. They're going to be brought out, right? Like a phenotype. But if you're in a relationship that's good and you still have that, then your relationship is better. You're less likely to see those hostile tendencies. So that marriage relationship definitely will affect how those genes are portrayed. And just remember that with direct instructions, it's better to be, explain it. Again, coaching allows for coaching and becoming more skilled socially. Modeling, remember, sometimes behaviors are passed on from generation to generation. Some are good, some are bad, but the children are always watching their parents imitating them. Feedback, you tell the child whether behavior is appropriate and should continue or is not appropriate and should stop. We learned about that with reinforcement, a reward and a praise for a good grade. Now I'm going to talk about that negative reinforcement trap now. So this is 3 steps, and research has shown it's most often between a mother and her son. So this is how it happens. So a mother, for example, I'll use a mother since it's most likely going to happen. A mother might tell their child to do something they don't want to do. So I need you to clean your room. The child responds with some behavior complaining. I don't want to clean my room. Not now. I'm playing my video game. Then the mother responds, with prolonged arguing, trying to get him to do it. Parent finally gives in because they just can't stand the complaining and arguing. and then the parent ends up rewarding the child for the bad behavior, and they don't end up having to complain the room. They don't end up having to clean the room. So that's what sometimes happens, that the child just complains or they're arguing, it's just too much, and parents can't handle it, and so they just give in. So that's negative reinforcement trap. So unwittingly reinforcing it, that behavior of complaining and arguing, and then because they responded incorrectly to the child, they get rewarded by not having to do the task in the first place. So remember that difference. So we've all been punished as children in one way or another. Some punishments are effective, some not as much. So what is the best way to do punishment? How has studies shown that successful behavior becomes from punishment? So these are some guidelines. So it's best if applied right after the undesired behavior is accompanied by an explanation and comes from someone with whom the child has a warm relationship. So you want to make sure it's in the moment that they understand what they're doing is bad. You don't want to do it 2 hours later when they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. They can't pull back into the situation and they're not going to understand. And you want to explain what they did wrong, why that was wrong, and why you're doing this punishment to have them be more successful. And you want to come from a warm relationship. So you want to have a good relationship with the child so that they trust you, that knowing this punishment is coming from love and to make them a better person. Some of the drawbacks of punishment is that the undesired behavior won't disappear unless new behaviors are learned to deal with the problem. And it can also cause undesirable side effects, angriness, or a non-compliant child. So another drawback also is when children become so upset when they're being punished that they miss the feedback. They don't get the feedback from the punishment it's supposed to convey. They don't even know why they're getting punished because they're so mad and they've shut down, right? Have you seen those children? That you can't even explain it because they're just shut down. They become so angry over the punishment, they just miss the meaning of the punishment, and you don't get any, you don't get the effect that you want. They're not learning anything. What they found, timeout, which we've heard of, most people know what timeout is. It requires a child who misbehaves to sit alone in a quiet, unstimulating environment, and it can be an effective form of punishment. It's a good balancement of punishment while minimizing drawbacks. Lasting minutes, enough time for all the parties to calm down for reasoning to begin. So you may start there, have everybody get in timeout, stop what you're thinking, calm down, and come back and begin some more of the punishment and the reasoning and why they're being punished. What they did find, though, is that physical punishment often leads to more aggressive children and mental health problems as adults. So physical punishment has shown to have the least effect on producing successful benefits. So parental conflicts affect children's development, right? It's just not the parent with the child. They see how the two parents interact with each other. So what are some of those conflicts? How do those affect the children's development? So one, children become frightened. They feel the family is unstable. Parents often carry over the conflict into the parent-child relationship. So if they're angry with their spouse, they may become really short with their child because that child came in at the wrong time, and the parent still hasn't calmed down from the parental argument. And oftentimes parents are just too tired from fighting with each other to invest time into high quality parenting. They're just too tired from doing all that. They don't, invest in what we call, those puzzles, the playing, the talking, the listening. So that's why it's so important that the parental relationship be stable for the children's development. And children respond effectively, when conflicts are handled constructively. So again, remember that modeling. They're learning from their parents how to have relationships, how to have good, partnership relationships, spousal relationships, relationships with their peers. They're learning how to solve conflict. So of course they're going to respond more effectively when they see those conflicts are handled constructively, and not as effectively when they're not. And they may develop some ineffective communication styles with with the other children as they do with their parents. So they're learning these skills, so they may show you that poor communication back to the parent, back to their peers. So they found that when parents handle conflict together, they get better results than doing it alone, and children become less withdrawn. And they also found that work-related stress impacts parental relationships. Makes sense. Parents can become detached and uninterested, leading the child to become anxious and upset. So you can see how having a strong parental unit team together can positively affect the child's development, self-esteem, communication with their peers, with their parents, and cause less anxiety and just having the child have overall healthy development. So what they found is that parents need to work together as a team to parent effectively. Competition, clashing over parenting styles, etc., can lead children to begin to withdraw. They don't want to see their parents fighting for their attention. They want to see their parents as a team. That gives them stability, that gives them hope, and it teaches them how to, solve problems together. Work-related stress can also lead to less effective parenting. Whenever outside forces cause stress and we bring them into the house, it just makes it harder for everyone. And children don't have the skills yet to deal with these emotions. So children become anxious when parents seem detached. They feel like maybe their parents aren't going to stay together. Their home environment might be stable. That stable base is changing. And then they become not interested in the family life because they don't feel safety in the family. And stressed parents can be intolerant and less accepting. So they may snap at their children, they may have poor parenting techniques, they may not reason, they may become more authoritarian. So having a good work-family balance is so important, and that good, along with that good parental unit, so that children feel that their family and their home life is a safe place to be, so they don't take those stressors out in school with their peers. That anxiety, they just aren't equipped to deal with that at this age, and it can manifest in behavior problems, school problems, difficulty, concentrating. So you can see how all this can affect that child's development. So just like parents can affect their children's behavior, children can affect their parents' behavior. So have you ever, as a child, maybe, changed how your parents reacted to you? Read the situation, maybe manipulated it a little bit. So definitely a child's temperament and age affects how much control a parent needs to show, right? So if a child is very needy, they may need more attention. If a child can play by themselves, they may need less. You have to show less. So definitely, and each child's different, right? We learned in the family they can have different experiences. So you may have siblings. One child's really needy, one child's kind of independent, one child's in the middle. So they get parented by different parents, right? Because the child changes the parent to have the correct response for them. Some families adopt healthy routines and some don't. And others develop patterns of arguments and results in defiant children. So negative reciprocal relationships should not be given a chance to become routine. So the biggest thing that they found is you're going to have times, right? You're going to argue, you're going to snap, but that should not be the routine. You should have healthy patterns of communications, healthy routines, so that you're setting yourself up for success. And when these kind of little arguments happen or something goes, you know exactly where to go back to begin those healthy routines again. So what they found is as a child ages, parents become more reserved in their affection and they gradually relinquish control as children develop cognitive. They get less hugs and kisses. And the children's temperament varies depending on the child. And the parent moderates their control depending on that child. So they found you can get a lot of parental influence, works well on a child that's active, that's young, who's eager to please adults. But you're not going to get a lot of parental influence on a child that's not active, who is less eager to please and may need more control. So temperament plays a huge part of the child affecting the parental style. Parents change behavior depending on the child's needs. Reciprocal influence helps to adopt those healthy behaviors. So healthy behavior, what is it? We talked about we need to maintain it. Well, healthy behavior is when children cooperate, they anticipate each other's needs, and are generally happy. So when the parents, the children, and the family can do that, they have a healthy routine. A negative routine would be disengagement. Parents withdraw from each other. Maybe no family dinners, maybe no communications. They're not available for their children. They're all on their electrical devices. Those do not fare well long term. You don't build attachments, you don't build social interaction skills, you become withdrawn. So creating those healthy routines is so important. What are some of the healthy routines that you had growing up or you're creating now? What are some of the unhealthy ones? What are some things that you can do to develop healthy routines so that you can affect positive, development, or some things you can do in the future? So definitely some good things to think about. So besides the parental unit, the siblings are the next closest part of your family. Depending on your birth order, will depend on how you relate to your siblings. So they found that having siblings affects firstborns by taking away some of the parents' attention, right? Once that, second baby is born, they become the object of attention and that firstborn can get jealous. Older siblings play with younger siblings. They comfort them and teach them. So if you're an older sibling, do you find that to be true? Did you have to take some of the parental role away from your mom and dad to help out? They found that popularity and school success for firstborns tends to happen for laterborns in the family as well. So firstborns and laterborns tend to be popular and have good school success. And they found that some siblings develop close relationships while others argue and do not get along well. So why? We'll delve into. So one thing I want you to remember is that younger children tend to be more distressed with new siblings. Parents can minimize that by having the child help take care of the siblings and be part of the caretaker role, so that they're still an important member of the family. And early establishment of friendships between siblings or conflicts that happen early on tends to stabilize into adulthood. So if they can establish those friendships early on, that helps with that long-term sibling relationship. So what they found is that siblings tend to get along best when, number one, they are the same sex, so girl, girl, boy, boy. Neither is too emotional, so they're not, they can be in the middle, balanced. They're not going to get extremely offended or extremely hurt by actions or words. They found that the youngest is in adolescence, so once that youngest gets to adolescence, they tend to be better, they get along better. When they're younger, they tend to be annoying, and you might have found that. And the siblings tend to get along best when parents do not play favorites. So that makes sense. So here's some information on birth order and how that affects parental relationships and some characteristics. So the first thing they found is that parents are often more affectionate and more punitive towards firstborn children. They set more realistic expectation for laterborns. So this is what you might see, first-time parents, right? They're afraid of everything. They're maybe more strict. They may give more affection, and then maybe, I can tell the difference between my brother, who's the oldest, and my sister. They become, I've already had 2 kids. I know I'm not as fearful. I'm older. I'm more relaxed. They don't have as much. They set realistic expectations because they've lived it. They've had experiences. They know things tend to turn out the way they want them. They're not as fearful. So you're going to see that different parental styles just on the experience that the parent has experienced from raising the other siblings. The firstborn are those guinea pigs for parents. They learn from their mistakes for the other children. They have a lot of enthusiasm, but no experience. What they found is that firstborns tend to have higher intelligence, test scores, and are more likely to go to college. Firstborns are more likely to comply with parents' requests. They want to please them. And laterborns tend to be more popular with peers and more innovative. They may not have as many of those rules and stuff. So they found that laterborns are less concerned with pleasing their parents and are more social with peers. So maybe that they get a little bit more control. The parents are a little bit more easygoing. They're not as strict. So they tend to have more control with their peers and less with their parents. Are only children more selfish than those with siblings? I don't know. No, I mean, I have an only child, and I don't see those traits, but what does the research say? So although the folklore, so the myth, says that indulgent parenting causes only children to be selfish. In fact, only children are often smarter and more mature than children with siblings. So that's just a myth. So let's take a deeper look into divorce and remarriage. So again, picture if you're a child of divorce or you've been divorced yourself or you have friends or family, what did that divorce look like? Was it amicable? Was it not? How did it affect the children? So kind of picture, if you have a picture of that as we go through this and kind of see if this sounds familiar. So what researchers found is that children of divorced parents often fare negatively than those from intact families. They're more likely to have marital conflict of their own and become divorced themselves. They found that divorce is harder on a child when it occurs in childhood and adolescence and when the child is emotional or interprets events negatively. Right? Earlier, they don't have much memory. They haven't formed those attachments. They don't know any different. They don't know what that being a family is like. So once they've established that, they have more to lose. So they feel it harder. And, anybody that's over emotional or, just tends to see things negatively is going to have a harder time because it's going to affect them stronger. They're going to have a harder time dealing with it. They're not going to have a balanced reaction. And they found that joint custody, both parents retain legal custody of the child, and that benefits the children if the parents get along. So if they can do that harmoniously and rise above for the children, then it will actually benefit the children. But it's key that the parents get along. And they found that children do better when parents are cooperative, especially on disciplinary issues. So if you've been divorced, if you know children that have been divorced or you've been and you play each other parents, one parent off each other doesn't tend to do well. You need to be consistent on discipline issues and cooperative. So they found if one parent is awarded custody, children usually benefit more if they are in the custody of their same-sex parent. So they get to see the modeling of their actual same sex. So the challenge is the traditional decision of awarding mothers custody, right? And it allows fathers to have more active role in maybe their sons' lives, but also if you have sons and daughters, it takes them apart. So it's very challenging. All the way around it's challenging. So why do you think that girls might be better off with their mothers and boys with their fathers? Think about development and what we know of boys and girls. So what research has found that boys do better with their fathers. They're less likely to become involved with negative reinforcement traps. So remember, that's more common with the mother. So they just tend to want to maybe model their father in learning the skills of the father, and they just want to have that relationship. And both boys and girls form stronger emotional relationships with same-sex parents than the opposite, like children seeking the same sex to play with from their earlier chapter, because they see themselves in that parent. And again, if you're thinking about, middle school to elementary, they're going to be going through, to adolescence and high school. They're going to be going through puberty. So they may want to be with that parent that has experienced those same, gone through the same thing so they can relate to them. So another thing why they gravitate maybe towards their same sex parent. So parents should talk to the children to help them adjust to the divorce. Open communication, reasoning, explaining, that's going to decrease anxiety, allow for the child to be a part of the decision making, knowing that they have some control in the situation. And it emphasizes that both parents still love them. So even though they're not going to be together, they still love them, and that their goals are to create a loving parental bond so that child can grow up successfully. Parents should not compete with each other or talk badly about the other in front of the children. They must remain involved in their children's lives, even if it is difficult to do so. So you can imagine, the child doesn't need to take sides. They love their mom. They love their dad. They need to stay neutral. They are not getting divorced. They didn't have a choice in it. They still they're still that person's child. So even though you don't like the other spouse, parents need to join together for the good of the child so that they can produce a successful child. So with divorce comes remarry. So I don't know how many people have been divorced and remarried, or been a child in a remarried situation, but more than 2/3 of divorced men and women remarried, so it's very likely. So that creates the blended family. So it's a whole new dynamic. So you might have two blended families. So a whole new dynamic for the child to deal with. So is it going to be full of anxiety? Is it going to be full of love and positive? So things to think about when this child definitely affects the child's development. So what is a blended family? It's a family consisting of a biological parent, a step parent, and children. What research has found is that boys fare better with a stepfather present than girls do. And adolescents tend to argue with step parents more, right? It's kind of like they're taking their parent away. That might have been their mom or their dad, and they might just been them. And now someone's stepping in. They may have maybe taken over the role of, if it's the mother by themselves, might have been taking the role of the father, and vice versa. So they may see that that person's infringing on their boundaries, their role that they've had in the house. And both children and adults need to be involved with a blended family and set realistic expectations, set what their goals are, set, their intentions. Let the children have a voice. They don't get to choose who their parents marry. They don't get to choose, if their parents got divorced, but let them be a part of the family. Let them have some choices, some discussion, so that they don't feel alienated or upset. So some of the statistics with this is that children average living in a single parent household for 5 years. So they've set up a pretty good routine. So when a step parent comes in and tries to take over some of those rules that child is taken on, it can be frustrating, and that child can have some resentment if it's not handled correctly. Children do better with a warm and involved stepfather, just like they do better with a warm and involved parent. So girls feel that the new relationship with the stepfather impinges on their close relationship with their mother. So especially if they were staying with their mother, it might have just been them, and they feel like they're a team, and now someone's taking their mom away. So they may have that resentment. So that's why open communication and realistic goals are so important, to let them know that they're not being replaced. They're just an addition. And it's harder when the stepfather brings own biological children, because they tend to favor their own children in disputes. And when the mother and stepfather argue, children tend to side with their parents. So again, right, it's that dynamic of binding, two different families together. And, you're just going to tend to side with your own. So it's taking those biases away and looking at it objectively is hard. So that's why it's important to set realistic expectations and ground rules, so that those little things don't happen. And stepfathers, they found, should be interested but respect established relationships. So we looked at some healthy ways, for the parental unit, for the parental styles, divorce, and remarry. So what happens when the parent-child relationship goes awry? Child maltreatment. So what is child maltreatment? It consists of physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and or psychological abuse. The most common form of maltreatment is neglect, which is really, they're all disturbing, but that's really disturbing when you think that neglect includes not giving child adequate food, clothing, or medical care. Psychological abuse, ridicule, rejection, and humiliation. And remember, we talked about earlier, some of this can lead to intellectual disability if it's that severe. Think about if you're like some of those orphanages or children. We hear on the news that they would let their children, starve their children, lived in a room, didn't feed them, fed them like dog food. I mean, think about that neglect. They are intellectually disabled because they've been maltreated. 750,000 children suffer from maltreatment, and of these, 75% are neglect, 15% are physically abused, 10% are sexually abused, and 5% are psychologically abused and had some experience more than one. So that's some really, that's some disturbing figures. They tend to have poor relationships with peers and often are aggressive, disturb cognitive and academic development. They're socially unskilled. They don't regulate emotions. They're disruptive in class. Can you think of why? They haven't had their basic needs. They have some kind of trauma that they have to deal with, and they have had no modeling, no environment to show how to handle conflict, how to have positive behavior, and they're not in the environment to learn. They haven't had any stimulus, so they're very, very, um, you know, damaged in their development and delayed. So there's several factors that make child maltreatment more likely to occur. So why does it happen? So one thing they found is that some cultures condone physical punishment. Countries that do not condone physical punishment tend to have lower rates of child maltreatment than the US. So they also found that parents may lack effective skills. Remember we talked about this about being knowledgeable and knowing what to do. We talked about this very early in the semester of that 16-year-old opposed to that 30-year-old pregnant. Does she have the skills to be an effective parent? Does she know, is she living in poverty? Does she have enough resources to thrive and not just survive? So parents may lack effective skills. They're living in poverty, which can cause parents to use physical punishment over reasoning with their children. They don't know better. That's what their parents did. They're stressed from just trying to survive. So all those things can add up on each other and make very ineffective parenting skills. Social isolation puts children at risk, and parents may have been abused as children themselves, and they're just mirroring and modeling what they know. They found that military families that have members stationed in combat tend to be more stressed out, and parents tend to they tend to have temporary single parenthood. So that family environment tends to be a little bit more stressed out. They found that socially isolating from families and friends and adults who could maybe protect them, maybe that's how abuse isn't found, like physical or sexual abuse, because they isolate them from people that would normally protect them, maybe grandparents or other family members, and they lack social support to help them be better parents. They just don't know better. They don't know how to get help. They don't know. They haven't seen what correct parenting is, and they don't, know better, so they can't do better. And younger children are more likely to be abused. Why do you think that? Because they don't know how to regulate behavior that aggravates the abuser. So if you're a 1 or 2-year-old and you're getting beat, or because think about all those stories we hear about the baby being shaken to death, or the boyfriend or husband or spouse or someone or parent just gets so mad because the baby was crying and they kill their child. Because younger children don't know when to shut it off. They don't know, like, they keep crying because it hurts. But an older child, a 5 or 6-year-old, may have learned that, oh, if I cry more, I'm going to get hit more. This is going to happen more. So they learn to behave that so they don't get hurt. And also, younger children are frequently ill, so they cry and whine more, and that adds stress to the parent who's already financially and emotionally stressed. So those poor younger children just tend to have that perfect storm of, unfortunately, more likely to get abused. Stepchildren, because they're less emotionally attached, so they tend to. So like when you hear, like I said, the boyfriend, maybe that's not the father of the child. They're not as emotionally attached, so they tend to maybe more likely to cause maltreatment. And abuse happens from different causes and is more likely with cultures who condone physical punishments, parents who lack effective skills for dealing with children, and a child's behavior is frequently aversive. So if they're sick or they are don't know how to self-regulate and they are in a stressful environment, they're going to cause more stress by crying, whining, and are more likely to receive maltreatment. So now we're going to take a look at peers, right? This is a huge part of middle school. They're really kind of breaking away from their parents and making them, peers are starting to become the most important relationship in their life. So let's take a look. What are the benefits of friendship? What are the important features of groups of children and adolescents? How do these groups influence individuals? Why are some children more popular than others? Why are some rejected? What are some effects of childhood aggression? And why are some children chronic victims of aggression? So think about you're in middle school. Think about this time, right? 7 to 11. What is happening here? What did you do? How are you forming your friends? Think of this time as we go through this chapter and think it, relate it to your own experiences or your experience of your children to fully understand it. So, what is friendship? Friendship is a voluntary relationship between two people regarding mutual liking. So think of your friends. You have different levels of friendships, right? Really strong, close ones, acquaintances. So how does friendships develop? At about age 4 or 5, friendships form between playmates, right? They find a common thing they like to play with. At about age 8 to 11, friendships involve mutual liking as well as trust and assistance. So maybe they like to both play soccer, or they've helped each other out, or they've been, they stood up for each other. In adolescence, intimacy exists in close friendships. So what they found is that girls are more likely to be intimate with one another and more likely to have a best friend. So they share more secrets. They tell more about their lives. Whereas boys, not as much because they're more physical. Remember, they don't share as much emotionally or socially. They have friends, but they may have more like tons of best friends, where a girl might have one really, really close best friend. Adolescents, they're more likely to confide in each other rather than family members. So that's that transition from parents to now their peers and friendships. So just remember, as children develop friendships, it becomes more complex. In adolescence, friends will be nice to them. Depends on how their friends acted with them, right? Friends will be nice to them. Will they keep their promises? Will they not say mean things to each other? Will they step forward in times of need? Will they willingly share a snack? Will they help them with their homework? That's what motivates them to become friends. That girl shared her cookie with me at lunch today. We're friends. They, were willing to step forward when that kid was making fun of me. That's my friend. So those acts start to help develop why they become friends. Someone's nice to me. And remember, girls have a better development of intimacy than boys and are more concerned about faithfulness and being rejected by their friends, right? This is the age where we start to get those mean girls that they start to maybe ostracize a girl for the way she looks or the clothes she wears, and girls are really, if you're faithfully, you're consistent, you're nice to me, and they're very fearful of being rejected. In adults, friendships are social, provide social and emotional support. And in elementary students, close family members, parents, siblings, and grandparents are there to help when you're upset. And that starts to, as friendship starts to develop, they start to look at peers more with that, and it kind of gears away from the family member. So think about your friendships. Think about your friendships that you started in middle school. Friends tend to share many characteristics, including similar attitudes for school and the same activities. Childhood friends tend to be alike in age, race, and sex. They treat each other as equals, which is rare between older, more experienced child and a younger child. So that's why they tend to be the same age, because they tend to treat each other as equals. They tend to be the same race or ethnic group. If the school's more diverse, then friendships are more diverse. The benefits are more positive attitude toward minorities and less targets of bullying. And popularities tend to stay with popular friends. So let's take a look and delve into what constitutes all the popularity and bullying and all that. We're going to look into that a little bit more. So why do some friendships end? Well, if you think back to why do some friendships begin? So why, if someone was just nice to me, or they shared their cookie with me, or they were faithful, it may be that we don't have a lot of stuff, exactly in common. We had some stuff, but as we start to grow and develop, new interests, things change. So let's take a look at why do some friendships end. So number one is lack of social skills to sustain the friendship. Maybe, they just kind of ran out of things that are in common to talk about, or one's really social and one's not. So it just, it ran its course. Another time it could be that one friend is unwilling to compromise or negotiate during conflict. So could you have one friend that wants to do it their way all the time? They don't ever want to change. Have you had a friend like that? Can you think about that? So if there's no compromise and negotiate, one friend might say, like, this just isn't worth it. They're not being nice anymore. It's not worth my time. So it just kind of dissolves. And interests change, like I said earlier. So something that you liked in, fourth, fifth, sixth grade may not be the same that, you like in high school. So good friendships have lasting benefits. Friends are very important. They produce higher self-esteem and less depression. You have someone to rely on. Increase pro-social skills. You help each other out, right? You are caring about somebody else's needs and thoughts and feelings. You're more likely to help them if you care for them and in turn help other people. And you have ability to cope better with life stresses because you have someone maybe to talk about with it who can relate to it and maybe share the same experiences. So remember, some friendships are long-lasting, some are rapid and wear thin and in. People can be too bossy or can't keep secrets. Um, some lack social skills, some are, interests just change. But if you have good friendships, you're less likely to be victimized by other peers, and you have better self-worth as an adult. So friendships aren't always perfect, as we all can tell. Friendships can have problems. So one of the first problems we'll look at is co-rumination. It's conversing about personal problems. This is common among adolescent girls. They put them at risk for depression and anxiety. So you can have aggressive friends that often encourage each other's aggressive behavior. So it's kind of that idea that your parents said, you are who you hang out with. So, if you're talking about your personal problems all the time and you're always perseverating on them, can kind of get you depressed, right? You're not talking about some problem, can cause anxiety. And if your friends are super aggressive, they're encouraging you to do bad things, then that's not healthy either. Friends who engage in risky behavior, smoking, drugs, sex, they often reinforce each other's risky behaviors and peer pressure, right? So all this starts to play a factor. So just remember, with co-rumination, friends who spend too much of their time together discussing each other's personal problems, they may grow closer but more troubled. So it's very important that there's a balance. So let's take a look at groups, cliques. How does that play into friendships? What factors determine what crowd a teen will fall into? Well, athletic ability, academic ability. We've already seen that we tend to go with like-minded people. So if I'm athletic, I'm going to turn to hang out with people that are athletic because we have something in common. If I am, have a high academic ability, I might tend to hang out with people that have same interests like that. Parenting style also contributes. So children of authoritative parents are more likely to have friends that endorse adult standards of behavior. So if you have friends that have the same type of values and rules, you're more likely to hang out with them. It takes less pressure off you. You've kind of grown up the same way. You have more in common. Groups tend to have a dominance hierarchy that is headed by a leader, right? You ever have a leader of the pack? A leader chosen according to the function of the group. So they tend to say, if my group is an athletic group, maybe it's the strongest one that's the leader. Or if it's a girl full of, maybe it's the one that has the most fashion sense. So whatever you value, it tends to maybe be, that leader is the group. So remember that a clique is a small group of children or adolescents who are friends and tend to be similar in age, sex, race, and attitudes. A crowd is a larger mixed sex group of older children, so mixed sex, so boys and girls, of older children or adolescents who have similar values and attitudes. So are you hanging out with the right or wrong crowd? Hierarchy groups tend to have better self-esteem than low status groups. And those with neglectful parents tend to fall in with that children that do drugs, that disavow adult standards. And then dominancy and hierarchy, the well-defined structures headed by the leader, whom all the other members of the group refer to. You see that a lot of times in movies too, right? It's easier to reduce conflict between members when they know their place and they defer to the higher ranking. There's not a lot of arguing because everybody knows their place. You have a leader and the other ones follow. So we know young boys tend to go, those were more physically intimidating, like I told you, maybe the stronger. And girls and older boys are more skill-based. So if they have a skill or they're the best at whatever that group of people do, they tend to be the leader. So peer pressure is not always powerful and it's not always harmful. So it can come in the form of pressure to perform well in school, or it can influence you to do something bad. So if you're with a bunch of people that are, are being on time or helping other people, then you're like more likely to do that. That could be a good form of peer pressure. But if you're with a group that wants you to play hooky or smoke, it could be a bad form of peer pressure. So just the term peer pressure doesn't mean good or bad. It's, what are they pressuring you to do? And peers are most influential when children are younger and more socially anxious. So when they haven't set their identity yet and they're more susceptible to people's suggestions, or when peers have a high status. So if they're with someone who, maybe is really successful in school, maybe really, great athlete, or, just wears the best standards. So when they have a high status, they tend to be the most influential. And when standards for appropriate behavior are not clear cut. So when it's kind of that ambiguous, I don't know, if I should do this or not, I don't know quite what's right or wrong, then peers can be like, oh, come on, it doesn't matter. So they have a lot more influence when, opposed to when, I know smoking is wrong. I shouldn't do that. So just remember that peer pressures, they conform to the groups that establish the norms. So for example, a 14-year-old may cut their hair like a friend because the peer is popular. They don't have any fixed standards for hairstyle, and they're young, but they just like it. Oh, they're popular. I want to look at them. Where an 18-year-old unpopular kid, tells another kid that they barely know to go shoplifting, that kid may resist because they're older. They have more established, right from wrong. The peer is neither popular nor a friend, and the norms for shoplifting are very clear. So, you can see the difference there on like how peers are influential when they're closer to them, when there's, nothing, no fixed, when it's kind of ambiguous, there's no clear cut, like there's no clear popular hairstyle. I'm young, I don't have, I haven't said all my stuff. You're more likely to follow it than if you're with someone, it's an unpopular idea, you barely know the person, and it's easier definitely to resist when it's a clear cut right or wrong. So most children at elementary schools fall into 5 categories of popularity and rejection. The first one is the popular children, and they're more liked by many, and maybe children who are skilled academically and socially. So they have something that they look up to. They may be aggressive boys and relationally aggressive girls. So remember those two things that we learned earlier, that boys tend to be physically aggressive, girls tend to be relationship aggressive. So they're the strongest of those. They may kind of, be such a strong personality and aggressively assert their personality that they become popular, maybe almost out of fear. The second category is rejected children, and they are disliked by many. Most are aggressive and hostile, others are shy or withdrawn. So the rejected child can go one way, aggressive and hostile, or really withdraw or shy. And most of the time they are disliked by many. The average child are liked and disliked by some, and liked and disliked, are liked by some and disliked by some. So they're in the middle. The neglected children are ignored by their classmates. That might be the one that you don't even know who so and so. I never even knew that they were in my class. They're just completely ignored. Controversial children are both liked and disliked intensely by classmates. So when you think of the aggressive girls, you might think mean girls. Antisocial social behavior has an appeal. Why? It's against the norm. Maybe that's kind of like can seem, powerful and, enticing to a young kid that, maybe not be happy at home. And rejected children are most likely to display these behaviors for no reason, which other children dislike. So there's just no reason why why they're aggressive or shy, and so kids just don't understand it, and so they tend to be disliked by many. So make sure that you understand what all 5 categories are, okay? Popular, rejected, average, neglected, and controversial. So what causes some children to display behaviors that makes others reject them? So we talked a little bit about this earlier, having parents who respond to conflict with aggression or intimidation. So they're just modeling their parents with their peers. Having parents who use inconsistent discipline. Parents and children can be taught more effective ways for dealing with others so they can help with that. So remember, if parents are inconsistent with their discipline, that's not creating a safe environment for the child, so they may act out to get control. Long-term consequences of rejection are linked to dropping out of school, juvenile crime, and psychopathy. So remember from your social cognitive theory that children see how their parents respond in different social situations and imitate those responses. The inconsistent parenting, punishing behavior one day and ignoring the same behavior the next day, just sends mixed messages to the child, doesn't give them that safety. They don't know how to act because they don't know how the parent's going to act, so that causes anxiety, depression. But consistent punishment that relies on love and affection and not on consistent punishment or power promotes social skills and in the process popularity, because they know how to resolve conflict. They know when something's right or wrong. They know the consequences. They already know the rules. So it builds up confidence and self-esteem, which relates to popularity. And socially aggressive, awkward children often reject this because they rely on an aggressive interpersonal style, which can be traced, to the parenting. So if they see aggression at home, they can do it, and the other kids are just going to reject that. So aggressive children and their victims. So what happens when children are really aggressive, and what do the victims do? So instrumental aggression. As aggression is used to achieve an explicit goal. So this might be part of that bullying, right? Seen as early as 1 or 2 years of age. So toddlers show aggression once they are old enough to play with others, and it's often physical. So maybe they want that toy and they just take it, right? They aggressively take it. Maybe they've seen that behavior at home from other children or parents, but it can begin as early as 1 or 2 years of age. Hostile aggression is unprovoked and meant to intimidate, harass, or humiliate. So why is instrumental aggression? The goal was just, I want that toy, so I'm going to do it. I want to push you over so I can get that toy. I have a goal. But hostile aggression, it's for no reason. Maybe I just trip that kid because I think it's funny. I just want to, cause harm because I think it's funny. It emerges in early elementary school years. Tendencies to behave aggressively are stable over time. It's linked with dropping out of school, adulthood violence, and unemployment. Hostile aggression in elementary school age children, they may spontaneously say you're stupid, then just kick a classmate for no reason, just to get a reaction. Relational aggression, children try to hurt others by undermining their social relationships. They spread rumors or tell kids not to play with another kid. That's something we may see more in girls because of that relationship aggression. You see sometimes, like we talked about earlier, as 1 or 2 years of age, they showed that 6 months who are biting are more likely to hit at 3 years old. They're more likely to kick a peer at 7 years old, and are more than 50% more likely to have long-term delinquent behavior. So it's a progression. So if you don't deal with this aggression, it can progress into actual long-term delinquent behavior. But if you can interact and stop some of these behaviors and change them, you don't have to see that. But if you don't, it leads to less education, lower employment, poverty, and stress aggression. The more stress, the more poverty, the more aggressive you're going to be. Small amount of people can go on to create havoc in society. So a small part of these really aggressive, hostile, aggressive people, can go on to really be your criminals, be, people that do assault and, murderers and stuff. So definitely a small amount of the population, but it can start in, as early as 6 months of age. So parental style and environment all play a factor. So why are some children just continuously targeted by bullies? Do you know that kid, no matter what happens, they're just targeted? But why is that? Well, what they found is that kids that are lonely, anxious, or depressed, or have low self-esteem tend to be targets. some that overact to bullies, making them easy bait, so they get the reaction so that the bully wants. So maybe when they trip them, they cry or they run away, so they overreact, and the bully, that feeds the bully to do it more because they're giving them what they want. And some are unwilling or unable to defend themselves, so they can't stand up for themselves, so they just tend to be a victim over and over. But victims can be helped by increasing their self-esteem and fostering their peer relationships. So the more peer relationships they have, people that support them, that will stand up with them, the better self-esteem they have, the less likely they're going to be bullied. And a school climate with zero tolerance for bullying is the best method for prevention. So I know my daughter's school, they have, bullying is talked about all the time. They have, workshops on it, teaching the kids the signs of bullying, where to report it. So I know definitely in my daughter's school, it's talked about. So kids are, are learning how to prevent some of that. So what have you seen, you know, if you've recently been through school or you have children in school? And how do you think we can make it better? So some things to remember: both aggressive or withdrawn submissive children end up victims of bullying. So aggressive um, themselves, they may overact and get their response from their abuser, or they're withdrawn, they may cry and get a response from their abuser. So victims are taught how to handle aggression. So when they are being bullied, they're taught to, um, they're encouraged to not respond in kind, to show no fear, and if they can increase their self-esteem, I'm not a loser, I don't have to put up with this, stand up for themselves, and then foster those friendships with peers that stand behind them. When there's a group of 4 or 5 kids around you, bully's less likely going to bully, right? And we need to recognize the signs. Schools, parents, teachers need to have that open communication so they can stop it right away, because bullying is becoming a huge thing. Kids, young, even in middle school, 11, or we see on social media committing suicide. And with social media, it's much even easier to really aggressively bully these children. So definitely something that, with the invention of social media and the electronics, gives them a much easier avenue to really bully these kids. So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you see us progressing in the years to come? So let's move on to electronic media. Now, this is kind of a loaded question because now all of us are on electronic media because we're being forced to. All our middle schools are, for the most part, are on a computer all day, and so they're getting so much electronic media. Some of it's, we're obviously in school-based learning mode, but what impact does all this have on our children? So what is the impact of watching television on children's attitudes, behavior, and cognitive development? And how do children use computers at home? So they're using it a lot more in this day and age, but what does computers actually, how do they affect? And I'm going to say I just watched a documentary. It's really good on Netflix called The Social Experiment, and I highly recommend for you guys to watch it. It really delved into how they took the creators of Google and Netflix and Facebook and how they're using psychology, predictive psychology, to form these algorithms to predict your behavior, to keep you on social media and these apps. It's insane how they are using your psychology without you even knowing, for you to click on things, they know what you like, when you're going to like it, to make you more buy it. I definitely recommend it. It's called The Social Experiment on Netflix. Great documentary to really look into how they are taking over. We've become the commodity, we become the product, and how they're using our information and our lives to sell to advertisers. So definitely take a look at that. But we're going to continue on looking at how electronic media affects a child's development. So television, we all have one. Many of us have multiple televisions. We watch on our smartphones, we watch on our computers. Much more so than when I was an adult. When I was a child, we had one TV. Cartoons came on Saturdays. You can have nothing on the TV after, midnight. So definitely a different culture. So TV is such an important influence in the socialization of American children. Cable, TV shows, YouTube videos. So what is that doing to our development of our children? And specifically in this lecture, our middle children, right? So what they found is that aggression increases after viewing TV violence. It may influence gender stereotypes, right? So if they're seeing a lot of gender stereotypes, they may perceive that as truth. May influence pro-social behaviors, though, something good, like shows are limit, the types of shows like we learned last week with Sesame Street and other educational programs. They help teach, how to share, take turns, academics and social skills. So it can be good and can be bad. So really need to look and see how we're using it. Typical U.S. graduates have watched over 20,000 hours of TV. That by the time that you graduate, I don't know if this is high school or college, but you probably high school. You've watched 22 full years of 24/7 TV. That's insane, right? What other shows do you think, besides Sesame Street and Education, what other shows do you think are pro-social that would teach math, science, reading, language, academic, social? What would you recommend? Especially after last week, we looked at those shows. Another thing I want you to definitely remember is the aggression increasing after viewing TV violence. And remember that it influences gender stereotypes. That might be on the test. But here's the good news. Research does not support the belief that watching TV makes children less attentive and or impulsive. There's mixed evidence that exists for whether or not watching TV makes children less creative. So studies are inconsistent in showing a link between increased TV viewing and lower creativity scores. So overall content has more of an impact on development than quantity. So it depends on what you watch, not how much of it you watch. So if you're watching a bunch of education programming depicting people being creative and encouraging children to pretend frequently, then children are going to be more creative. They're going to learn. They're going to know that. Opposed to if you're having a child watch a more action-based TV, children are less creative. Timing and pacing do not follow normal timing, right? Like if you ever watched a TV show, it looks like something that should have happened like 3 months. It took 3 days, right? It's not reality. It reflects that it doesn't reflect in creativity for the child. It's less creative. It's not real life. So it's more about content than quantity. So with computers, they found that the content of computer games have an impact on children's development. So games such as Tetris, do you remember that? Putting the little blocks in the right shapes can improve spatial skills. So that makes sense because you're using your eye-hand coordination and seeing the space in the right, that matches the right space to your item. And they found that playing by the video games can make children more aggressive. Again, all that role playing looks like real life, but not real life. So, they don't maybe realize that if I actually shoot a gun, it's going to cause permanent death. So there has been a relationship between that. Computers are also used for online communication. So has benefits for relationships, easier disclosure, all that stuff. What they found is that more than 90% of American youth lives in homes with a computer, and 75% have access to a tablet device like an iPad. And they use it at a remarkably young age, 2 or under. They can use a mobile device. Most can use it better than an older adult. I know my daughter could definitely use the phone better than my mother. Could show her every app. They all know how to do it. Way better than my mom could do. And they use it to play with games or watch videos, especially when parents are enthusiastic about new technology. So if you like new technology, they're going to like new technology. Boys, older children, and children from middle-class homes spend more time using media. They have more access to it. Most use media to pursue 3 things. What do you think they are? Number 1, watching videos like YouTube. Number 1 reason why children use media. I can't tell you how many times that my daughter or my nephews or whatever want to watch a video on YouTube. Number 2, playing video games. And number 3 is communicating with peers on social media. So if those are the top three the things they do on media devices, on computers, I don't see any education in there. So we have to be really, really careful on how we monitor and computer time and what they're using and their content. And also with social media at a younger age, when is the right age to get onto social media? With cyberbullying, antisocial behaviors, lower self-esteem, greater feelings of depression, you know, all this has really come to the forefront. And with access, it allows that, more of that bullying because they don't have to be accountable. It's much easier to type something in and say mean things than when you have to say it face to face, like when I did when I was a kid. So there's a balance. So where do we strike that balance? I want you guys to think about that. So I have my daughter who's 11, and she has her own take on what she uses her computer for. So what do you use your computer for, Allison?
I like to, whenever I get on my computer, I try to make it for not necessarily educational as in school, but I like to watch like a lot of analytical things or theories that it does get my brain working, even if it is not purely educational. Um, and otherwise, I like to get on the internet I like to write and I like to draw, and so I like to get on the internet to like type in my stories so other people can read them, or I like to like create the characters by means of digital art or some sort of like dress up game when I was younger. But I also I want to be an architect when I'm older. So I like to do things like model homes or home design or stuff like that. So that's what I try to use the internet for, but sometimes I catch myself doing things that are more um, just enjoyment and don't have any educational value.
So that's a perspective from an actual, child in this age group. So if you were to interview, a child and maybe your child's in this age group, she's 10, almost 11. What would they say? And would the parent know what they're doing? So we need to really look at that. Where what are computers being used at, and especially now when it's so prevalent, we have to be on computers all the time. So lastly, we're going to look in chapter 7 is how do we understand others and each other? As children develop, how do their descriptions of others change, right? It starts with me, me, me. They look at the others in their environment. So how does this develop? How does understanding of others' thinking change as children develop? And why do children develop prejudice towards others? So let's delve in. So, as children develop, their descriptions of others change from concrete observations to psychological and abstract traits. So, remember that 5-year-old can begin to predict the behavior of a child that they are told is shy, whereas originally they may just not understand, as everything's concrete. So, if that truck is blue, it's blue. It's not, any variation. Or if they're sad, they can't be, happy. So, it starts to evolve from that. They also, you're going to see that a 4 or 5-year-old can begin to understand basic psychological traits such as selfish. Why won't they share? Why does that person talk to us? Um, but they usually see the positive until about 10. So they have these questions, but they usually are going to err on the side of a positive reaction until they're about 10 years old, and then they're going to maybe start to look at some of the negative reasons. So it's in this time that we can really influence and teach children how to have positive pro-social behaviors with each other. So to understand what others think, we need to look at Selman's stages of perspective taking. So what this is a sophisticated understanding of how others think is achieved gradually throughout childhood and adolescence through perspective taking, skill progress through these 5 stages. So I'm going to go through them and give you examples. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this example of 2 boys arguing about what to do at each stage. So what they're arguing about is, do we play or do we go watch TV? So in the first stage, which is undifferentiated, and that's between 3 to 6 years old, so we're going to say our boys are 5. We know that children know that that they and others can have different thoughts and feelings, but often confuse the two. So, for example, at 5, they may say, "I don't understand." They don't understand each other, so they may say, "You should want to do what I want to do, which is play." So they can't even understand that they have another perspective. I want to play, so you should just want to play because I want to play. So now, as they progress, now the child's 9. So we're going to go to social informational, and that's 4 to 9. And that's when children know that perspectives differ because people have access to different information. So when we're taking our child now that's 9, the 2 boys are 9, and like I said, they understand that others wants to do something different, but they're lacking that essential information. So one may say, "I know that you want to watch TV, but if you knew what I knew," which is like so awesome to play outside, "you'd want to go play outside." So it's like, "I know you want to do that, but if you knew what I knew about playing outside, you would so want to play outside." So that's that social informational. They know that the other person has a perspective, but they realize that that other person may not have the full story on why you want to go and do what you want to do. So the third stage is self-reflective, and that's 7 to 12. And children, this is the step where the children can step into another's shoes and view themselves as others do. They know that others can do the same, so they can switch out. So we have our 2 boys. They're 12 years old, and again, they understand that each wants to they do want to do something different, and they could step into each other's shoes to understand. So one might say, "I know you want to go play because you haven't done that all week. I understand that." But they still may say, "And I know, and I want to watch TV because I haven't got to watch TV all week." So they can understand why you might want to do it. They may not agree with it, but they can definitely understand your reasoning. That's self-reflective, 7 to 12. So stage 4 is third person. So now we're up to our 15-year-old. So they can imagine how another person, a third person, could view the situation or the argument. Children can step outside of the immediate situation to see how they and another person are viewed by a third person. So we have our boys, they're now 15 years old, so they can imagine how another person, so let's say a teacher, could view the disagreement. So a teacher could come in and say, "Oh, I can see your merit for watching TV, and I can see your merit for playing. Maybe we can compromise." So they can understand that they could have a third person look at it. And stage 5 is societal, and that's 14 years to adults. And this is when adolescents realize that the third person perspective is actually influenced by a broader personal, social, and cultural context. So now we have they're 18, these 2 boys still wanting to play and watch TV. But now they can appreciate that maybe, oh, it's silly to watch TV on a sunny day. So they can say that that third perspective, which would be the environment. So when it's so nice outside and it's not raining, I should take advantage of that. So they can understand that. So this perspective taking allows children to get along better with peers because they can take advantage of mostly positive influences. So it's a good conflict resolution. When you can understand other people's perspectives, then you're going to more likely to have some kind of conflict resolution. And at 7 years old, you really emphasize those concrete characteristics. And at 10 years old, it includes psychological traits to concrete. So definitely understand Selman's stages of perspective taking and why it's important for understanding what others think. So now we're going to dive into prejudice. So how do children develop prejudice? Where does it come from? Well, let's define prejudice. Prejudice is a view of other people, usually negative, based on their membership in a different group. And it begins once children recognize their membership in certain groups, racial, social, etc. Young children's prejudice is usually confined to very positive feelings for their own group, not overt hostility towards another. So they may learn that, they see their culture, or, they're thinking, "Oh, we make the best pasta, whatever." They're Italians. Maybe they just think all Italians, make excellent pasta because that's what they've had all the time. So that, it's a positive feeling for their own group, or we're very loving or social, or whatever ethnic group. So it may start positive in young children, but by 10 or 11, children are aware of racial stereotypes, and prejudice usually declines due to learned norms. So it can begin in about 2 to 4 years of age, and it's stronger 5 to 7 year olds, and it remains stronger after. So we'll take a look a little bit more on the next slide. The research also found that prejudice sometimes increases in early adolescence. They internalize the views that are heard from people around them. They're searching for one's identity can cause a negative view of other groups. So they're trying to get positive about them. Sometimes they have to put other groups down. And definitely, again, it's that mirroring and modeling. What are they being exposed to? What are they being taught? What are they hearing from other people is going to shape what they think. And are feelings of prejudice a natural part of development? What do you guys think? Can we avoid it completely? So how can one eliminate a child's prejudice? What can we do? So one effective way to reduce prejudice is for children from different races to have them work together toward a common goal, such as completing a class project. So when we get together, when we work together, especially children, like I said earlier, right? They don't know the difference. Usually about 7 to 10, it starts to set in. And they see their similarities. They see each other working. They take out the biases from the adults. You start to eliminate some of those prejudice because they see that people are like, even though we don't look the same, exactly the same, we have the same feelings, we can work together, we have this, same ideas, so things in common. So that just helps. And children are, can be very, open, and they just see each other for fun, a girl, a boy, or whatever. They just see them, very pure. And it's the adults in the environment that can kind of, influence. So if we can get different cultures, and we can learn from each other early on, we can stop some of these prejudice from forming. So just remember, another thing to help eliminate prejudice, role playing as members of different groups. Ask a child to imagine a situation where prejudice would be directed towards them and how they would feel about this treatment. Being able to put themselves in those shoes. How, when they can relate to that, then they're less likely to, show that behavior to somebody else. And then teach children about racism through history. Let them know, don't hide it, but teach them the lessons learned, and really instruct them how they can eliminate some of those prejudice. And children and adolescents should learn that each person is unique, and that his or her social group discloses little about the person's identity, and that we need to treat, people as humans and respect different social groups, so that we can help eliminate some of these prejudices. So that's into chapter 7. Great job. So this week we'll be doing the exam, and I know it's a lot to cover, but I'm going to give you till Sunday to do the exam. I'll have more in your week 6, more information. My daughter says thank you for letting her be a part of this lecture, and that good luck to you guys all on distant learning. And she says it's hard for her and hard for you guys, but she has faith in you that you're going to do great. She wanted me to add that little tidbit. So you guys have a great week, and I will be posting some supplemental videos to help you this week and going over the rest of the week. Take care.